Daily Rambam for Thursday, Yud Ches Cheshvan Tavshin Pei Aleph, the 11th Perek of Hilchos Shabbos. So yesterday we learned from Kosher until Tzad, and today we're going to learn from Sheichet until Mesartet. So according to the conventional Chaluk of Malachas, this is the third series of Malachas. You have Siddur the Path from Chayrish until Oifel. That's how you get to a loaf of bread. Then you have from Goizes till Teifer and Kereya. So you starts with his wool until you're sewing. And then you have from Tzad, where you capture the animal until you get to Kaisev and Meichik. You're writing on the parchment. However, if you paid attention yesterday, in the middle of yesterday's parak, we learned Baina, Seiser, Makva, Patish between Kereya and Tzad. So the Rambam has a bit of a different order. Also, Mesartet, we have it in the middle on our conventional list. The Rambam is going to have Mesartet at the end, after Kaisev and Meichik at the end of this parak. So that's why this parak ends with Mesartet, but it's really the entire, to make lines for writing. Yeah. And this is the same order. This is the Rambam's order. Look in the beginning of Perek Zion. He has the full list in one shot. He has that order there as well, a bit different than ours. Now we're going to learn about Sheichet from Halacha Aleph to Halacha Dalet. So we start on Halacha Aleph. Sheichet Chayev. So when we say Sheichet, we mean Shchita Mamash, like a Halachic Shchita. It says V'loi Sheichet Bilvad, not just Shchita per se. The dog, the sheret. If you take the life of any living creature, bein b'shchita, bein b'nechira, bein b'hakaya chayiv, whether it's literal slaughtering, or you just bludgeon it, or you beat it up, you're chayiv.
So you step on the ant.
We're going to get to ants in a bit, actually. If you strangle it, so I guess it's a bit of a less of a direct act, but you are causing it to expire. So it is a tiled sheichet. So that's a tolda. And that would include if you take a fish out of water. Now you already had it in a cup, so it's not tzad. You didn't capture the fish now. Otherwise, you just want to simplify that, eliminating the tzad. You took it out of the cup and you let it out of the water. That's chaynik, and that's sheichet. And it doesn't even have to fully die. The fish, as long as there's a patch of dry skin between the fins, the size of a coin, the sela, you're chayiv. It cannot be resuscitated. It can't live anymore. If a person stuck his hand into an animal and removed the fetus of the animal inside, you would also be chayiv. And the Maggid Mishnah says, the Gemara says, why is a sheichet chayiv?
Why are you killing it if you remove the?
You removed it when at a stage where it's going to die if you remove it.
Oh, not to help give birth.
No.
You pulled it out because you want to kill the fetus.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to abort what's happening in the animal.
Yeah. So no, a fetus has interesting status in halacha. Depends on the situation, but at least for the purposes of this halacha, it's considered sheichet for Shabbos.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a tolda. So the Gemara says, why is it sheichet chayiv? And the Gemara says, mishum netilas neshama. So meaning, in different malachas of Shabbos, you have a chakira. Is it the pu'ula or is it the tetzah? That's a bit of the lamdas, whether it's the act or whether it's the outcome. So here, it sounds like the Gemara itself is saying, it's not the act of shchita, it's not that, you're a professional sheichet, it's the outcome that it dies. Now comes, in halacha beis and halacha gimel, now comes the famous Torah versus science controversy. So if you have crawling creatures that do reproduce through male and female, or those that don't come from normal reproduction, they're generated from the dirt, like the par'oshin, which are presumably the fleas. So both categories are still like living creatures. You're chayav for sheichet. But if it's not even from the dirt, if it's from the excrement of an animal, or whether it's a fruit fly, something like that, and he doesn't say flies, it could go into loim shalabasar, either the worms in meat, with loim shabatecha kitnius, or the worms inside the legumes. Hahargam potter. In that case, you are potter. And then you have an halacha gimel, hamafala kelev b'Shabbos, if you are delousing. Yeah, of course, potter is always abalasar. Hamafala, and the next thing is the chatchila. Hamafala kelev b'Shabbos. If you're delousing your clothing on Shabbos, moil sakin and bezerka, and you can grab the lice, you can roll them in your finger, you can throw them away. Mutter lareg sakin and b'Shabbos, you're allowed to kill them. Mutter repnei shehem and azeya, because they're from sweat. So the Mishnah quotes a bit of the background of the Gemara, that the Chachamim, the way they defined it is that anything that's part of Erava, if it reproduces in the normal way, because what do you have in the Mishkan? In the Mishkan you had the Elim Adamim. You needed to shop the Elim Adamim in order to get the Eires Elim Adamim for the Mishkan. So that's the Shchita that the Gemara mentions for the purpose of building the Mishkan. And anything that's similar to the Elim Adamim, and that it reproduces in a similar way. And then you have the paration, even though they don't have a normal body, they don't have bones in the sense that the creatures that normal animals do. So what is the paraish? So he says, the Rambam says that some say it's the black one called the bargut. Now, bargut in Arabic is the flea. I looked it up, so it's still the same word. The paraish that he's saying is never going to offer, and you are chayav. Is the Ramban says it's the bargut. It comes from the earth during the summer, and even though it doesn't reproduce, you're chayav as if it did. He says, Haraya, you have the famous mud mouse, which is its own story that comes up in the Lagabi Tumah Vitara, the mouse that's half earth and half mouse. So if you kill that, you're chayav. It's mamash, a whole mouse. So similarly, the paraish, the flea that comes from the earth, we'd also give it the same. We treat it the same way. You're also chayav. And what we say that things are not like the El Madam Marpater, that's like a kina from sweat or worms from the other places that I'm mentioned. Then it's the other opinions now about how would I identify which one is which. On the general topic, the general question of how do we approach this halacha nowadays, the big controversy. So Rabbi Chaim Rappaport from London wrote an overview of the topic in Haras B'Yorim and Tafshin Samach Daled. So I'll quote some highlights from there. He breaks it down. There are a few approaches. He says you have the Pachad Yitzchak. The Pachad Yitzchak is famous. He was Rabbi Yitzchak Lamperonti of Italy. He made the first attempt at a Torah encyclopedia in the Seder of the Aleph Beis. They have entries, and he has Ketayim, different interesting things in there. So he's famous for raising this issue in his Sefer. And he says, Ani atzor ha'kaisev, my opinion is, Yilav the mistapina amina, if I wasn't a little intimidated, I'd say that now that science today, this is already in the 1700s, probably early 1700s, says since scientists today have already seen that everything that's alive comes from eggs, there's eggs for everything, so, and they've proved it, so shomer nafshe yirchak mehem, you have to be chayshish, gabe Hilchos Shabbos, shouldn't kill a parish, don't kill a kina, and don't get into a suffix chi of chatas. And that connects to the general controversy. You have the Gemara, where the Chachmei Yisrael and the Chachmei Yisrael argued about the sun and the earth, and this is the Gemara implying that sometimes the Chachmei Yisrael can have the last word. And so he takes that Gemara to mean that sometimes we follow the Chachmei Yisrael, and that itself is a big controversy. Is that something we can say about something that the Chachmei Yisrael say? Another approach that says to be chayshish, but doesn't go as far as the Pachad Yitzchak. So you have certain Litvish poskim today that say, look, we believe Chazal said that the stuff comes from sweat. We believe, but the Lamaisa, the ones we're looking at right now, they have eggs. So I don't know what Chazal was talking about, but whatever I'm looking at, I have to follow what I see. I see that there's eggs. I have to be chayshish. So that's what some of the Litvish poskim say. Then you have those that say not to be chayshish. So you have the Pachad Yitzchak's Rabbi in the same Pachad Yitzchak. He said his opinion, but he also quotes his Rabbi was a Yeshua Briel, and he said we can't change the dinim that we have the Kabbalah from the Kadmonim, and we shouldn't be looking for more rayas, new pro or against, doesn't matter. We follow Kabbalah, Rabbi Seinu, and in that Gemara about Chachmei Yisrael and Chachmei Yisrael, that itself, others claim that no, the Maskana is we follow Chachmei Yisrael. And so no matter what chakiras, no matter what research is done, we don't trust what they're doing. We follow Chazal. Then you have those that put it another way. They say we follow Chazal because every halach in Torah is be'etzim true. It's be'etzim representing a higher truth. Then you try to find a reason to be malbishit in Olam Hazeh. But if Chazal say that you're allowed to be hiding the kina, So it doesn't matter whether they're eggs or not. They were malbishut in a certain reason. The reason doesn't seem to check out, so forget the reason. But you have to follow the din. The din of Chazal is the din of Chazal. And then there's the approach that tries to make a compromise and says that maybe Chazal are talking about what the eye can see. The eggs of some of these creatures are microscopic, so it could be science will call them eggs, but the halacha we don't follow with the microscope. We follow what our eyes see. Per our eyes, there's no period of arivia, there's no eggs. So that's how you can reconcile the two and then keep the halacha the way it is. There, Haraport is trying to be chayker, which the Rebbe responded to questions on this topic, and the Rebbe seemed to insist that if Chazal say the spontaneous generation, it must be spontaneous generation. But the question is, what's the Rebbe saying the Gabi, the kinim itself, an actual kina on Shabbos? Not fully clear. He's trying to figure out, Ayin Sham to see his suggestions as to which category Lamaisa the Rebbe's opinion fits into. Moving along to halacha daled. So if you have creatures that sting, that bite, and it's deadly, certainly deadly. There's the fly in Mitzrayim. I'm not sure the details today. You have the West Nile virus that's carried by mosquitoes. I don't know if that's what he was referring to. Vitzira Sheba Ninveh, the wasp from Ninveh. Ninveh, of course, is near Mosul today in Iraq. Akrav Sheba Chadyav, the scorpion from Chadyav. Chadyav is in English. It's called Ariabini. It's if you're familiar from Chazal with Munbaz. Munbaz Hamalach was from Chadyav, and Erbil today in Iraq was the capital city of that kingdom. So anyway, you have these different creatures. V'nachash Eretz Yisrael, a snake in Israel. B'chelav sheita b'chomakim, a rabid dog anywhere. Mutal hargim b'Shabbos k'shiro. The moment you see them, you can go and kill them immediately because they're that dangerous. Or kalamazik and anything else. If they're chasing you, you can kill them. But if they're passive or they're running away, also then you can't pursue them and kill them. And if you were just innocently walking and you happen to step on them, then it's mutter. Of course, yesterday we had the Gabit Tzad, also similar halachas regarding dangerous creatures and whether you can trap them to protect yourself. Before we continue to Hamafshit, we're still talking about Natilas Neshama. So I should point out that earlier this came up also with a chayvel, when the Rambam said that someone hurting an animal or person is told of dash, but it's mefarek. You're separating the blood. So the Maggid Mishnah mentioned v'yesh mishapireish u'mepnei natilas neshama sheba'isei makam. This is a form of sheichet, a form of natilas neshama. You're taking away the life of that spot, and that's how the Alter Rebbe writes it in Siman Shinta Zayin Sif Yidal and Tazvav. He says natilas neshama shechayav Allah. You don't have to remove the whole neshama, even mixes neshama. So if you extract some blood from one aver, that's natilas neshama sheba'isei makam ki hadam hu hanefesh. The blood is the life source. And even if the dam doesn't, and Tazvavi says, even if the dam doesn't actually come out, but even if Nitzer Adam, all those halachas, so he applies it, puts it in the framework of Natilas Neshama. And the Mitzvah in there, that it's not the Rambam, but it's Rav Yosef and Yerushalmi, Rabbi Tam and Teisus and Subis. However, they also point out in the Haris there now that when it comes to Dinei Chayla of Shabbos and Siman Shin Chav Ches, that Alter Rebbe also mentions that there could be an issue of Mefarek, of maybe sucking blood out of a wound or something. The Alter Rebbe mentions Mefarek over there. Also, another thing that's related is we mentioned Psik Reishe, although in the beginning of Perek Aleph was Psik Reishe. It was about chopping off the head. That's the classic case, that you want the head of the bird for a toy. You don't actually want to murder the bird, but automatically you're killing it. If you look in Siman Shin Tazayin, Alter Rebbe B'chlal, there's a big arichas there about killing different creatures in different ways in different cases. I'll just mention one more halacha that Alter Rebbe mentions there in Sif Chav Gimel. Alter Rebbe says those people who kill spiders on Shabbos, hashmames, shekoyin shpin, you have to be moicha. You can't just go around stomping or killing spiders. Right? People get terrified. Spider, and they go kill it. Because it's not actually harmful. Obviously, I guess in Australia you have certain dangerous ones, but the ones in Europe were not particularly deadly or dangerous. People are afraid it's usually the spiders on the ceiling spinning a web. It's going to fall into your food. It's a davish and matzui, and you can always cover the food on your table. And it's also only achas me'elef. It's mesukenes. Now, interestingly, we say achas me'elef also by a yoldis. That a yoldis is mesukan achas me'elef. But there we are, b'chal Shabbos. Here, achas me'elef mesukanes. That's not a basis to kill the spider. And even if there was a sakana, it's not the type that the Rambam described as a zvulp sheva mitzrayim, that you can go out of your way and kill it. Only the fitumai. So to make a macha if anyone is killing spiders. Moving on to mafshit, ma'abed, and mamachik, all together in halacha hey and vav. So in halacha hey, the Rambam says a mafshit me'arek delasas kameya chayev. So if you peel skin off the animal, and kadelasas kameya is the shear for a kameya, for an amulet, that's the smallest bit of writing that you would have. And this is all about writing, so that's the shear. So then you're chayiv. The same goes from abed for processing the skin to make parchment for the size of a kameya. You're chayiv. And it's, whether it's processing or whether it's just directly salting, shamalicha min ibudhu. Salting is a form of ibud. The Rambam says doesn't mean that you can't salt your food. Ain't ibud boichlim. You don't say there's ibud in reference to food. However, it's not so simple. It's not like you could do anything you want with salt on Shabbos with food. So if you look at the Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, first Alter Rebbe says if you salt raw meat, even if it's a lot of salt, so it should be preserved and it shouldn't spoil your potter because ein ibud oichlem min ha-Torah. Ram didn't say mutter potter; he says ein ibud boichlem. The way the Alter Rebbe says is potter. Aval midivrei seifrim, there is ibud boichlem. And therefore, you're not allowed to salt raw meat, even if you want to eat it raw on Shabbos. So, for example, you want to be machshir the meat. You want to because raw meat benefits a lot from salt. It was never salted before. It softens it, it prepares it to be eaten, and it's similar to ibud. And certainly not to preserve it, meaning halach l'maisa midrabanan, you're not allowed to, even if it was already salted. And we'll see more about this in the Rambam Perek Chav Beis. Now we didn't finish the halacha. V'chein hamoichik, and the third halacha is v'chein, we call it memachik min ha'or kadilasas kameya chayiv. So you're scraping off the hair or whatever it is to make it nice in order to write. Ve'ezehu moichik, himself says, zeh maver seir at semer me'al ha'or acher misa at sheyachlik pnei ha'or. You're removing the hair of the wool, depending on the animal, after it dies, in order to smoothen it out. Halacha vav that told us. If we learned in Hilchos Tefillin that the gvil has two halves, the duchsustus is, according to the final girsa in the Rambam that we had, the duchsustus is the outer and the klaf is the inner. So that's also a form of mafshit. You're splitting the gvil itself. If you stomp on the skin until it hardens, or you soften it with your hand and you stretch it and you straighten it out. That's unnice in the way the professionals who deal with the leather do. So that's a tolda of being ma'abed. If you pull a feather out of a wing, that's a form of mimachik, what we call mimachik or mechikas ha'or. It's smoothing out the wing. And here's where we suddenly start venturing into smoothing other things. So retia is a bandage, so that's mimareach, a shaiva, a zephes, wax, tar, all the other things that are sort of soft, and you can spread them out and smooth them out. Until it's very smooth on top. So that mimareach is an extension of meichik. And if you have skin that's stretched between the poles, between the pillars, and you're rubbing with your hand, that's also chayav mishum meichik. So mimareach, of course, raises a whole bunch of questions, common questions with today's cosmetics and stuff like that. So interestingly, the Gemara actually says you're allowed to stomp on spit that's on the ground on Shabbos lefi tumay. So the Magen Avraham has a chiddush there. So the Magen Avraham has a chiddush there that the mimareach only applies when you actually want it to be distributed. You want to see it spread out. But if you want it to be absorbed, the spit, you don't want to have a nice layer of spit. You're stomping on it because you want it to get absorbed. So that's the Magen Avram's chiddush, which is like a chiddush. But lefi that, if you have cream and you're not trying to walk around with a thick layer, people that maybe put suntan and they want to leave it on, that'll be a problem. But if you want it to be absorbed, according to the Magen Avram, it might be okay. So that's something that the Sfarim nowadays talk about. I think generally it's not something that's done, but that's one discussion. You have the discussion about soap. The soft soap, the slightly harder soap, also a bit of a discussion. Some say in certain cases, depending on the thickness, it might not be a problem. Right? The thinner it is, the better off you are. Then you have the whole question of toothpaste on Shabbos. Is brushing your teeth with toothpaste, is that memachek? Are you spreading out the toothpaste? The Igros Moshe said it's also, but the Chaim Noah and the Ktseis HaShulchan, could say somewhat famously said that it's not Isser Mimareach. Which again, it's not really something that we do. There could be other problems as well with blood, causing blood and other stuff, schita. But there might, in the Shmir Shabbos Kol Chassid says the minhag is just not to, even without the toothpaste, not to brush one's teeth. Anyways, those are issues that all arise from this halacha. Okay, now to quicken the pace a bit. You cut an actual piece out for the size of a kameh, you're chayiv. But you have to actually intend it. It's this length, this width, and you're cutting it deliberately. That's the malacha. But if you're just cutting, ruining it, or you weren't paying attention to the measurements, you weren't paying attention to what you're doing. It's just mindless. Or you're just playing around. Harez a potter, still not allowed, but not the actual malacha of machatech. Kaimet is like kanaf. Kaimet is like kaitem. If you trim a wing, harez a teles machatech v'chay. That's a told of machatech. If you trim, you shave the edges of a beam of wood. Chay mishum machatech. Again, it sounds like a tilde. You're not actually, what you're cutting off is not what you want, but you're shaving, what you're leaving behind is being trimmed from whatever you're cutting off. Is really any, someone who's an expert woodcutter or a smith, if you slice off a piece of wood professionally or a piece of metal, it's all an extension of machatech. You take a piece of wood and you start chopping it, cutting it, so it could be a toothpick or to open a door, it would be chayiv as well. Ches, however, anything that's edible, even for an animal, different things that grow. You're allowed to trim them. That's not, you're not creating a keli. Apparently, that's the definition. You're allowed to trim fragrant branches that you want to smell, even if they're very hard and dry. You can break off whatever pieces you want. Doesn't matter what the size is. Now, moving on to ksiva, kaisav, and moichek, and that's going to be practically the rest of the Perek with 2 lines about Masartit at the end. And if you erase the space in which you can write 2 letters, Chayiv, so that's the flip side. Moichik is the flip side of Kaisav. It's erasing those 2 to write that space to write 2. And because of that, there's actually a difference. If you write 1 big letter the size of 2, you're potter. You have to write 2. But if you erase the big one and there's room to write 2, then you're chayiv, because there it's just the space. But if you wrote 1 letter and that completed the whole sefer, then you're chayiv. We had this yesterday or the other day with Oirig, where also if it's the last thing that completes the ariga, then you're chayiv, even if it wasn't the full share. Okay, so I'm going to ask the kalkul chayiv. Even if you have in mind to be mekalkal, you're ruining. I'm just scribbling on it to ruin it. You're still chayiv. Where you're writing is not part of the definition of ksiva. Just the writing itself. So there's no real kilkul b'ksiva. Ksiva is just a creative form. There's nothing kilkul about it. Of erasing could be a form of destruction. That could be, then you're putter. If ink fell on a sefer and you erased the ink, so wax fell on your book and you wanted to erase it, and your notebook, whatever it is. It all depends on the space. If you cleared up the space to write the letters, you're chayiv. Yod, a case of kfula pa'amayim hu shem echad, going to rar, teis, gag, chayav. You write a letter twice, but it comes out to mean something. So rar can mean salivating, drooling, taste, to give, gag, a roof, you're chayav. So it doesn't have to, dafka be 2 different letters, it just has to be a word that makes sense. Okay, so b'chol ksav, v'chol lashon chayav. And if you write in any alphabet, any language, even if it's 2 symbols, not actual characters of the alphabet. If you write 1 letter next to writing that was already written, like ksav agabe ksav, writing on top of other writing. Hamaskaven lichtev ches because of shtei zayin. Now ches and ksav ashuri is really two zayins with a hook on top. So you wanted to write a ches, which is one letter, and whoops, you actually ended up writing two letters, two zayins. Or any other letter that could happen to. Or one letter on the earth and one letter on the ceiling or on the wall. They can't be read together. You wrote one on one page and one on another page, and they can't be read together. Potter, that's not the proper form of ksiva. But if you wrote the one in one corner and one on the wall right next to them on the same corner, or on two pages, but it's the same two pages next to each other. One's right here and one's right here. Then chayiv. Let's say you have some parchment and you're in one location and you wrote one letter in this location. And you went that day because of and you wrote the second letter from Medina Acheres from Megillah Acheres. And you wrote it on a different piece of parchment. Because you could put them together. And we don't care that, you didn't actually put them together. Because unlike earth and a wall, you can't move the earth and the wall. They're already in place. But two pieces of paper, you can put them together. Gimel, if you write one letter, even if that letter has deeper meaning and represents a full word, you're still potter. Mem. Let's say, all the things that have meiser on them, you make a mem. So everyone knows it means meiser. You wrote it as a number. Instead of writing arba'im, you made a mem. Potter. But we said earlier, if you made a ches by mistake into two zayins, you're potter. But if you're being magia letter, it started off as a ches and you erased the hook deliberately, you also made it into two. Then you are chayiv. So you don't have to actually write the two zayins. You can erase the thing in the middle that turns them into two zayins. If you write in your left hand or on the other side of your hand, with your leg, with your mouth, with your armpit, or maybe it's with your inside your elbow. But the point being that it's not the normal way of writing. Your potter. A lefty who wrote with his right hand, like a smoke adam, which is the equivalent of everyone's left hand, potter. With his left, which is really his right, then you're chayiv. If you're ambidextrous, b'shava, right with both, then you're chayiv for both. If a child is holding the pen and an adult holds his hand and uses his hand to write, then he's chayiv. If an adult is holding the pen and the child is moving his hand, then potter. The adult didn't actively write, and the child's a child. You only chayiv if it's actually something that it lasts. Right? You have doesn't mention, but you have questions today. What if you write on the steam on the window or the condensation on the window? Invisible ink. You have questions like that. So the way that Rambam writes it here is different forms of black ink, essentially. And it has to be on a surface where writing will last. So
on those boards that you could erase it easily,
but it still could last there. So any normal surface for writing. But if you write with something where it doesn't leave a mark, mashkin will make paytas, liquid. So you write with the liquid, but it doesn't stay there.
They make coffees. They write.
Right. But it doesn't last very long. Or you wrote with normal ink, but you wrote it on leafy vegetables or anything else like that, then you're potter. Still not allowed to, but potter. It has to be both writing with ink on a surface that will allow it to remain there. And the same goes for erasing. Erasing something that's like that. If you write on your skin with a pen, you're chayiv. We said earlier, is a surface for writing on. Even though the warmth of the skin of your body is going to erase it after a while, that's just like any other writing that erases over time. But if you scrape it, cut it into your skin, you're potter. And this actually has an interesting Gemara related to it that relates to Yeshua and Eitri. The Gemara says that Masaret al Basari is potter. The Gemara says, why? You have Ben Satada. Ben Satada Haitzik Shafim in Mitzrayim. How did he get the secrets of the witchcraft out of Mitzrayim? Rashi says that the Mitzrayim, they had a very tough, strict system. They didn't allow you to take the writings out of Egypt. You had to leave it there. And he wanted to leave with the information. So he inscribed it on himself in that manner, not even with writing. He sort of carved it into himself. So the Gemara says, bring a raya from Satada, Einavin raya min Ashaitim. That's crazy. That's not normal. Don't bring a raya from that. Then Gemara says, Ben Satada, isn't he Ben Pandira? And the Gemara says, well, the Baal was Satada, and the Baal was Pandira, and the Taisvis over there says, it sounds like Yeshua Noitzri, but Lavdaf get fits with other Mekaitis by Yeshua Noitzri. But those who are familiar know there's other stories about Yeshua Noitzri with the Beis HaMikdash, that he got the Shem of the Beis HaMikdash that way, or Bechlal, and his father was Pandira. Anyway, so that's just an interesting background to this halacha. If you rip into the skin, I'm assuming not on himself, just normal skin, and you it's the shape of writing, that is chayav mishum kaisav. That is a form of writing. But if you just make marks, you just you just have something that's sharp, and you're sort of making marks. That's not actual writing. Tazayim, hamaver joyagabi sikra. You put black ink over red ink. Chayav shtayim. You're chayav double. Achas mishum kaisav, because you just wrote with black ink that stood out on top of the red ink. But achas mishum meichid, you also essentially erased the red ink. Have a joy gabad joy, but black on top of black. The sikra gabad sikra, red on top of red. Sikra gabad joy, or red on top of black. Potter. Yud zayin reishim teledas kaisavu. What's reishim? Keitzad. Reishim rishamim betzudos. So you're just making marks, images, b'koichol, b'shashar, blue, red, whatever the different colors of Eitzban Kadech Shatz Yar and Reishman, the way artists do. There is a Chaim Mishum Kaisav, that is also a form, a tolda of Kaisav. And if you erase it, the takin, in order to accomplish something thereby, it is it. Now finally, Hamasartate. So you're making the lines like having a Sefer Torah. Back then it was more common. It helped you write on the parchment. Just the amount that you can write 2 letters under. Chayav. The carpenter, they have to make a line, a red line, whatever, on the board, so that way when they actually cut through, they'll cut in a straight line. Is it Tiladas Masartit? That's a told. Givlim, Shoisin came Bavanim, the people who cut rocks, so they do the same thing. They want to be careful. They're cutting it the right way, so they make marks, lines. Because same goes for them. In this case, it doesn't actually have to be with ink. It could just be a line. Just you carve a little line. The way we know Sirt it is.